Last week I showed off some of these miniatures that I got from MEPTOYS, and these are miniatures from the Invid invasion, or that they made for promotional items for the pre-order of the Invid invasion board game from Solar Flare. Now these are 3D printed, resin 3D printed miniatures. So again, when you get them, there's a whole bunch of cleanup you need to do. I started the process. They're not ready for paint quite yet. You can see, especially on the back, some of the surfaces are a little uneven. So you need to, essentially, and that's because of the supports that are part of the 3D printing. So you got to clean off the supports. You got to sand down anything that is bumpy or has a weird texture. And again, it's resin, so you need to do that very carefully before you can prime and paint these guys. And yes, one day I'll prime and paint these things. So we've got Cyclones, we've got Invid Mecha. They have them in various scales and sizes. It's kind of complicated when you look to order these things, but they're super cool and I love them. Like I said, this first batch that I got, these were given to me by the company to check out, and I think they're super awesome. And immediately after I took a look at these in hand, I placed an order to pay for more. And I got that order in. So in the original batch, they sent me 4 Cyclones. So of course I had to order the 5th. So this is Sue Graham. And she, unlike the other ones, she doesn't have a gun. She has a video camera. Well, what passed for a video camera in the 80s. Now, of course, you would just use your cell phone. Something that's kind of cool when you buy 3D printed resin things from people, or even non-resin but 3D printed, is you never know what the color is going to be, because it just depends on what color resin they pour in that day. So it can be slightly different, could be the same, it could be transparent, who knows. But again, the detail on these are super great. They'd look really nice painted, I bet. One day. So that completes my Cyclone collection. We're going to talk about Cyclones more in a minute, though. All right. Then I bought the bigger things. So these are all in their small scale, the smallest of... So technically, you can buy these miniatures in 2 different scales, and within each scale are 3 different size categories. So the littlest mecha has these little teeny tiny ones. Whoop. And then they go up from there. So in the larger scale, these are the smallest miniatures. Going up from here are alphas. Now, if you don't know what an alpha is, let's see. So remember, in the first generation of Robotech, which was also the first Macross show, you have the VF1 series. They're Tomcat inspired, and then in this so this is Robotech, the 3rd generation, so the last part of Robotech, which was made from the anime series Mospita, Genesis Climber, Mospita, this whole thing. But in that one, there are what are called, well, in Robotech, it's alphas. So alphas look like this. It's similar to the original Veritech. It's a transform-in jet to robot. So this is a superposable action figure alpha made by Toynami. This is they did these in a bunch of different versions. So this is the metallic color was an exclusive to something. Hey, Patty. Alphas, I've got a fair amount of alpha toys from over the years. There have been several. Not a lot, not a ton, because the Mospita show is not Macross. It's made by some of the same companies. Again, it gets super complicated with all that stuff, but different things. So Toynami has made these little morphers that are kind of goofy looking. We've got a whole bunch of these around. Toynami also made the little chibi I-Men version, which are cute and chibi. The alphas did come in different colors. So standard were red, blue, and green. In addition to the color, each one has a slightly different head. And technically in like the design specs, they're different versions, but whatever. And then there's a shadow version. That's the gray. So yeah. In the 80s, there were original alpha toys. So here's one of them. These were made by a company called Gakken. And these are pretty rare, especially these days. They made a couple of different sizes of these that do transform. And I do have the full-size alpha. I couldn't really get to it today, and it's really big. One of these days I'll have to do a toy stream without the overhead where I can go through some of my bigger Robotech toys and related products, because some of them are really giant. So there's a larger, it's essentially a larger version of this, but it's not quite as fiddly. It's actually a really cool toy. And then Toynami and a Japanese company called Aoshima made actual like heavy duty transforming ones. Unfortunately, there are like endless problems with this mold. Things don't fit right. I don't know if you can see, but like the front tilts up. Things don't fit flush. There are newer versions. There are newer transforming toys of this that came out just in the last couple of years that are much, much better. They're also hideously expensive. $200, $300. I have several of these, so I'm just gonna stick with those. Zardoz, welcome. I hope you're doing well. Okay. Now there haven't been a lot of small scale alphas and things, but I'm very excited. We've got, look at these. Look at how cool these are. So again, these are MEPTOYS resin 3D prints, and these are absolutely beautiful. They're a little bit bigger, like I showed you, than these Cyclones. And these alpha, as you can see, the alphas, it's a lot of flat planes and hard edges. So like, these prints are just, they're really crisp, a lot of detail. And so they did each alpha. Yeah, and each one is in a different pose. And yeah, I'm really happy with these. They look great. So I got one of each. Naturally. And these are available from the MEPTOYS website, and you can get them in two different scales. So if you, this is the larger one, but you can also get them smaller. Oh, and then here's the shadow alpha with its little rounded off head, and the shadow alpha has a unique gun, and they have 3-fingered claw hands instead of normal humanoid hands. So they have 4 alpha Battloids, and then they have an alpha in Guardian mode, which again is like, it's essentially halfway in between. It's an airplane with arms and legs. No jet mode for the alpha, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I don't know if their license extended to, remember, licenses are super weird with stuff. They might have only been able to make figures without being able to make essentially like airplanes. and stuff like that happens all the time with licenses. I do know. Then they did also, okay, so again, this is the medium size, small size, medium size. There's a bigger size. Oh, and they're also Invid Mecha in this size, but I didn't buy those because I don't care as much. So they made the beta. Now, in the lore of all of this stuff that we're talking about, there's two mecha that the good guys use. There's the alpha, and then there's the beta. The beta is a much larger, It's a fighter bomber. It's a little bit more of a support craft. Hey, Aerodinsk. And the gimmick is that while both are fully transformable, do all the nifty things, they can combine. Two can become one. And so the Alpha can dock into the front of the Beta and become a larger war machine. The Beta offers more missiles, stronger engines, it's transatmospheric, all this cool stuff. Now the Beta, I'm going to be honest, the Beta is ugly. It's an ugly design, it's brutal, it's blocky. It looks like this. So this is the 3D resin print that you can buy of a Beta in Battloid mode. It's a design only only a hardcore fan can love. It's got this weird missile thing over the top that as a kid you might think are some sort of eyes. There's a little head unit right here, it's tucked in. But yeah, it's weird, it's chunky. The transforming of these makes no sense, and like it's very difficult to make a physical product that actually transforms that works, because a lot of let's say the animation kind of hid a lot of the flaws in the design and how it would actually work. But MEPTOYS made one Battloid, so it's this one, and then they made a Guardian mode, and again here you can kind of see how kind of ugly the design is, and it's super weird. It's like where are all of these parts going? And they're not exactly to scale with one another, but that's obviously this is much smaller, but that's fine. It doesn't need to be. Now, the Beta is incredibly rare in the world of collectibles, because it's weird looking, and it's not the hero machine in the show. They are in the show, but they're sort of in the background mostly. There have not been a lot of products of the Beta over the years. Now I showed you this. So this was made by, like I said, Gakken, Gakken, in the 80s. Now this company did make a Beta toy. Now again, these were Moss Peta toys, not Robotech toys. So instead of being called Alphas and Betas, these were Tread and Legios, the original Japanese names. They made it so Tread was the name of the Beta, what would become known as the Beta. They did make a transforming Tread toy. It's about this big or so. That is one of what toy collectors call, that's a holy grail toy. In my entire life, I've seen one in person. There's a collector / toy seller here in Southern California who has one. Brings it with him to conventions, shows it off. It's usually in a case, and everything else is labeled with a price, and that one just says, make an offer. It's like, all right, how many thousands of dollars would you want for this thing? Yes, I dream of having it, and no, I will never have it. So, and the story behind it is really, really interesting. It's, so again, it was made by this company, Gakken, but they made a few of them to do as a test, but then it was canceled. But a few of them made it to a distribution company in France called Lancet, and was sold in a few stores. So they only existed, made by a Japanese company, distributed and sold in France, and good luck ever finding one. It's wild. There is, now Toynami and Aoshima did make Betas that are sized and scaled with this Alpha toy and can actually attach to it. Like I said, it's huge. I have one of them. It's massive. I can't really show it using this camera setup, but one day I'll do the whole we'll do it straight on. I'll show the bigger stuff. But yeah, so it was especially really cool to actually get some new beta products in this line. Yeah, new channel goal. Yeah, I don't know how many thousands of dollars that guy wants for that one. Now, if you remember, I have shown before, there was another company, another person out there who makes 3D models, and they made an alpha and a beta. So that's what the beta looks like in jet mode. Although this is with the front cockpit not deployed, because they made these so that you could merge them somehow. So yeah, like that. So look, that's pretty cool. So that's how they fit together. Essentially, the alpha just docks into the beta, and then they can fly around and do stuff like that. Now these are pretty small because they are sized relatively to the original Robotech RPG miniatures. Although that's not quite right either, but sizes and scales are tough. But yeah, so I got a handful of these from a non-licensed seller. So these are inspired by the real designs. And this alpha is a little bit modified as well. It doesn't have the, I always forget, the parts that stick up so that it can dock with the beta. Like that. But it looks cool. And then the guy was awesome again and threw in some other little freebies and little miniature test prints, which is really cool. 3D printers tend to do that. They tend to accumulate testers and failed prints that still are interesting and can do cool stuff. Okay, so that covers the order that I made from MEPTOYS. Now, Carlos, the guy over at MEP, he is constantly cranking out more stuff. And already he's moved way beyond these, and he's working on a new project to make an Invid Shock Trooper. Now this is the original Matchbox toy of the Shock Trooper, just missing that front canopy there for the Invid. He's making a very cool modern action figure version of this. Tons of articulation, looks amazing. And he's shown some pictures in the process, and I wanted to share that and talk about that for a second, because it brought up some really interesting things about the toy making process, which is always interesting to talk about. Transform, fit to screen. There we go. Okay, so you ready to learn about toy making? And this is some old school toy making. Okay, can everybody see the picture? Now in that picture, we've got a few different things going on. The gray mecha in the front, in the foreground, that is the planned toy. Okay, that's what he set out to make, right? So that is it's probably a 3D print of a digital sculpt. So that is like an original. That is an original prototype. In the old days, these would be hand sculpted. Nowadays, you sculpt them digitally, and you get that original 3D print. It's fitted together, probably with really basic pins. Estalis, thank you so much for the follow. We're talking about toys, Robotech miniatures, all sorts of cool stuff. Zardoz, god damn it, I hope so. I do think so. I think we'll start to see stuff produced overseas start to be distributed here. I think that'll be officially distributed here. I think that'll be the first thing. Okay, so that figure clearly does have some articulation to it. Usually what happens is, again, with these 3D printed ones, you'll 3D print all the pieces, and then you'll attach them with like big pins to keep the parts together. So it won't be really stable, but you'll be able to move things to see where all the parts go. Because then what happens is you take that 3D printed model, usually the physical one, not just the file, and you'll send it to the factory in China. They'll take it apart, they have to make the mold for each individual piece, and then then they'll do all the injection molding and make the actual toys. So what happens is, so you send that to China, they make the mold, but before they make the mold, they have to prove that they can make those pieces. So the two toys that are in the back of that picture on either side, those are what are called 2-ups. Now, 2-ups is a classic thing in toy manufacturing that you don't see nowadays all that much. And essentially what it used to be, and this obviously it still is done sometimes, is that the factory, to prove that they can make this toy and make it look good, they'll make prototypes that are twice as large as the toy is supposed to be. That's why 2-up, like literally 2-up, 2 times the size. They'll get those all hand sculpted, produced at the factory. They'll paint them really well, and then they'll send them back to the client essentially, and the client will sign off on, okay, are all the details there? Is all the articulation there? Is the paint work there? Good. Now shrink it down to the size it's supposed to be. Again, this is like something that was long a part of toy producing, especially for action figures. So Carlos shared pictures of these in the back. Again, those are 2-ups. And then we get into another interesting thing. So you see that there are two of them there, and that they're different colors. Another thing that happens when you're dealing with companies, your factories in China, is you send them a prototype, and again, Carlos probably sent them the one in the front or one like it, and you say, okay, I want this, and then you send them all sorts of color references, and the color references can be physical things, they can be digital images, they can be swatches, whatever it is that you want. And then the factory will paint a prototype and send it to you, and then you'll sign off on the colors and if something needs to be changed, etc. Zarda's, yeah, exactly. The 2-up should be essentially an exact replica of the standard toy, just twice as big. Yeah, so you can see if there's anything weird going on the larger scale. Exactly. Now, factories historically will screw up anything and everything they can. So often they'll send you prototypes back in slightly different colors. Did you actually mean this color? Did you mean maybe something else? I've heard, again, I've never dealt with factories. I've never produced a toy myself, but I know a lot of people who have, and I have heard countless horror stories about working with factories in China. But it's just the way it goes because it's the cheapest way to produce things, et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, Carlos got 2 prototypes back, the 2-ups in the back, with wildly different colors. Now, what happened here is that Carlos happens to be colorblind. So I don't know exactly the story if he requested a couple different versions, but he got these 2 different versions, and then he shared them with people saying, okay, I got these back. Which one is right in the community? Because he can't tell by himself. Now, the one on the left side, screen left, so this one right here, the darker purple, that is essentially screen accurate, right? Or closer accurate. So it's like this one. The more vivid purple that he has is better than this junky old Matchbox toy. Now, all that being said, I see that pink one, and I love that pink one. So I immediately messaged him, and I was like, do the purple, do the accurate version, but dear God, offer that pink one as a variant or something, because I want that. I want that one. Yeah, Nerdy Duckin', exactly. So people with different color spectrum access may have a hard time distinguishing things. But you got to keep that in mind when you're producing toys. If you can't tell yourself, yeah, have somebody else or have the community figured out. Oh, Zardoz, I bet, yeah. There are a lot of people out there with a lot of different abilities to see different colors in the color spectrum. So again, part of the part of the thing. So, like I said, I know somebody who's made a ton of toys in China, and his stories are wild about like sending, and it's like the some of the times it's like the most basic things. Like you'll send them a ball, and you'll get back a test that's a cube. Like it's just completely wrong sometimes. And they don't care. They're like, whatever. CPAT Ran, welcome. We're talking about Robotech and toys and models and the toy industry and all sorts of cool stuff. Yeah, Nerdy Duck, and again, and some people with different abilities to see different colors. Sometimes they can see different shades, or to recognize that there are different shades happening, even if you can't tell the different colors involved. It's really interesting. Thank you so much for the subscription. You like robot. I like robots too. I'm a big fan of robots. So yeah. I don't know exactly. Oh, and the other thing that happened. So again, MEPTOYS showed off these prototypes, and people instantly fell in love with the 2-up size. And were like, we want that. The little one is great, but we want the 2-up size. So now he's looking at options for actually producing those. Which is cool. I mean, hopefully, he's a great dude. His company does really cool stuff. I hope Harmony Gold lets him make whatever he wants, because clearly people are going to buy all of this stuff. And he's already gotten really good at making small batches of toys and keeping them affordable, which is crazy. Plus the ones that went out. Yeah. Oh my God. In China. Yeah. Again, like the stories about Chinese factories are wild. Absolutely wild. Okay, so all of that stuff, well, except for the little ones I showed off, all of those are official licensed products. Now let's look at some things that are maybe less official, you might say. Maybe not quite licensed. I don't know where these things came from. They just show up at my door sometimes. I have no more information than that. So there are other people out there who make... yeah, exactly. These are Robotech. So I found there's, like I said, there are places out there that make stuff. Yeah, they came from the Warp Savage Punch. Exactly. Who knows? Found a place, got some things, wanted to see what it was all about. So we've got some itty bitty teeny tiny Cyclones. They are pretty small, a decent amount of detail. And again, these are all pretty raw prints. I haven't cleaned up any supports or smudgy areas or anything. But these are neat. Macrotech or Robocross, yes. Yes. Yeah, Zardoz. Everything. And it's funny when just recently, what was it? Somebody was talking about wanting to make toys or to get toys somehow. People who obviously were not who didn't know better. But they were talking about like, yeah, just go back to a factory that you trust and you know they're going to do a good job and you'll make the thing and blah, 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 blah. And from what I've heard, you can make toys with a specific factory. And the way it works generally is that like every factory is its own entity in China. Some of them are owned, multiple factories are owned by the same company, but still each one is run like its own state. You can have worked with a factory multiple times on huge orders, and you come to them with the 10th order, and they're like, and the relationship is like, we've never met you before. Here's our prices. There's discount. There's no such thing as a discount. Every project is like starting over, even with a company you've worked with before. Now, I don't know if that's the case always, but I've heard that from a couple of different people. And yeah, you just have Every step of the way, you have to check everything. And again, the bigger toy companies, Navi, Pandar, thank you so much. Excellent question. First of all, thank you for the resubscription. Yes, we do. My wife and I, we do own a 3D printer. It's still in the box. We have done work on getting the 3D printer in room set up. We actually just got more stuff cleared out of it. We just have to build some shelving. So very, very soon. Sooner than ever. Excellent question. So the mid-range two large toy companies, they will fly people from the American office to China to go to the factory to look over these prototypes and things. Because sometimes I can't even imagine this workflow. But like I told you, so somebody here, so like say I wanted to make a toy, right? I would hire somebody to sculpt it, to sculpt a prototype, and the prototype would have to be disassembled because in China they have to make each part into the actual mold to make the mold to go into the machine to be injection molded, that whole thing. I would also have to have another one that I pay somebody to paint by hand to make it look absolutely perfect. And I would send all those things to a factory in China. They would start their production and make prototypes. They would send those prototypes over to me. I would have to look them over, look at size, scale, look for any defects, do all the color testing. If it moves, I have to check articulation, all of those things. Inevitably, I'm going to have notes. I have to send these things back. They have to send me another prototype. So obviously, as you can see, we're dealing with lots and lots of time, lots and lots of shipping. Zardoz, there is a book that somebody did on toy production. I'll find the name. I haven't actually read the whole thing, but it is fascinating. So anyway, all this back and forth is just massive amounts of time and stress. So again, even like mid-tier toy companies, and especially the big boys, they will fly people out to China to go and stay there and oversee these stages of production at the factories, which is crazy. and even nowadays with like telecommunications or whatever and Zoom and all that, they still do all this kind of stuff. Eventually things might evolve, but yeah, it's still crazy. So again, interesting to note that MEPTOYS makes these Cyclone figures, but they don't make just the riders on the motorcycles like these. And again, I don't know if that's because the license did not include the option to do that. Possibly. So I got a few little Cyclones, and again, they're not as detailed and perfect as these are, but these are okay. Yeah, the whole Chinese factory thing is so crazy. And then that's not even getting into like the seconds where the factory, at the end of the day, they blow the whistle, the factory closes for the day, and then basically like they ring the bell, they turn off all the machines, they turn off the lights, they look at their watch, they wait a couple minutes, turn on the lights, turn on all the machines, run a few more, and then put them out the back and sell them to other people, and sometimes in different colors, and it's crazy. Yeah, it's a wild world. I'd love one day to go and actually see it in action. Maybe one day. Okay, so we've got Cyclones. What's next? In the later parts of Robotech, they introduced some more weapon systems, shadow technology, all this other kind of crap. But they have these things called Synchro Cannons. They're essentially portable annihilation devices. So this is one of those. This has never been made in an actual product before. There were plans for Toynami to make basically like a shadow beta that was going to have a synchro cannon like this attached to it, but that never actually came out. So I was like, oh, synchro cannon, that's cool, I'll get one of those. The gimmick in Robotech is that the biggest spaceships have a main gun, and it's described in various ways. But if you have the role-playing game, you read the rules for the main gun, and it says when it fires a beam that's X dimensions wide, and it travels this far, and it annihilates anything it touches. So you don't even have to roll for damage. It just obliterates whatever it hits. Unless it's something like super gargantuan, and then the damage is, like 4d6 times 1,000 damage or whatever. But so anyway, the Synchro Cannon is like a miniature version of that. Yeah, Savage Punch. Yeah, usually the ships are. Yeah, in fact, in the Zentradi ships that look like pickles, essentially they split open, and the gun is the entire length of the ship on the inside. So yeah. Okay, so we've got the Synchro Cannon. Here is a Zentradi soldier in armor, and this is a really beautiful print. I'm really happy with this one. Just kind of just a dude pointing, cool pose. Now, we've talked a lot about, again, looking at it in terms of Robotech, the first generation of Robotech, and now a lot of the third generation of Robotech stuff. There's a generation in between, the second generation of Robotech, the Robotech Masters series. It doesn't get a lot of love. If you're familiar with it, this is the part of the story with Dana Sterling and the armies of the Southern Cross. There's the main characters use hover tanks, transformable hover tanks. There are some other things. It's generally considered the weakest link in the three series that made up Robotech. It still has its charm. It still has some really cool vehicles, really cool armor designs, but because it's not quite as good as the other two, there have not been many products made of those mecha designs over the years, whether it's from the original series or from Robotech. Now, there is a gigantic hover tank toy made by Matchbox for Robotech. I have one. I've had it since I was a kid. It's enormous. So again, I'll have to do a straight on stream one day to show that kind of stuff because it's huge. But this entity, where I happen to find some of these, they have 3D models, and they make them in super teeny tiny scale. So these are the three modes of the hover tank. It has a robot or Battloid mode. These are really teeny tiny. I mean, again, these are technically for wargaming, so depending on what the scale you're in, you'd have a base with a few of these on it, that kind of things. There is the tank mode, which essentially it's just kind of folded up with the guns facing forward on its legs to walk around. And then transport mode, which tucks away the heaviest guns but lets it kind of fly around quicker. It's kind of hard to see because it is so dang tiny. These models are not super detailed, so they work best in little teeny tiny scale. So like I said, there is a hover tank toy. Like, it's huge. I didn't even take it out of the case because it's too big to show in this at this depth of field. It would take up the whole screen. But at least there is something. There are other vehicles from the Southern Cross era that have never been made into collectible form, not counting like garage kits that are impossible to find and probably impossible to build. But those include the Logan. The Logan is a transforming Veritech jet, which has I think the design is really cool. It's a little bit more, hold on, let me get the focus here. It's got this unique rounded front, these smaller little wings in the back, a little gun that points off the front. I like the Logan. I think it's cute. The Logan does not have 3 modes. It only has 2. Yeah, it is this mode and then sort of like, yeah, it doesn't have a head, but essentially it's just, so tiny. Essentially plain with arms and legs, but it doesn't have a full-on robot mode. I'd love to see this thing done in some sort of a toy form or larger models eventually. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, I gotta get that. This is literally the first Logan collectible I've ever owned, because they just do not exist. And then there's the Ajax. I don't just love it for the name, but the Ajax is an attack, space-capable, transforming helicopter Veritech. And it is super, super cool. The rotors are essentially optional. It has a mode with the rotors deployed for atmospheric combat, and essentially they fold in and it becomes a jet for space combat. This thing is it's super, super cool. I love it. This one's a little bit bigger, so it fits in a little bit better with some of the other toys. And then the robot mode is kind of clunky, but I was happy to get one finally. Oh my God, Aaron, that's such a crazy question. It's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. Yeah, Zardos, that's a good point. Yeah, a lot of the Southern Cross stuff was more ground based. There are also in that series, there were a lot of Battloids and non-transforming things. The enemies were non-transforming Battloids. So here are a couple of those. Sort of like basic arms out poses, which look a little silly. So yeah. Now, this is a VF4 Veritech. This was never really in the animation. There was a model of it in Robotech. It was supposed to like come after the VF1. There's wide dispute about how this thing transforms. It's not nearly as clear as a VF1 where everything goes in the transformation. A couple of different artists over the years have done different depictions of how this would look in a robot mode. I think they're all terrible. I don't really like this design, but the jet is cool enough that I can add that to my collection of jet things. The person I got this from threw in some random bits and bobs, so some of those little tiny pieces, and then he threw in a Guardian mode of this that was all smashed to bits. And so I've been fixing it up, glued the legs back on, glue the back wings back on. I just have to glue the arms. But it's not a terrible design in this mode. But yeah, like I said, the robot mode for this thing looks just bizarre. Except for the New York Jets. No New York Jets. Okay. So this was all mostly Robotech based on the different things in Japan. Now, as we talked about with the new agreement between Harmony Gold and the Japanese companies, there are lots and lots and lots of other Macross and related anime series, movies, various things, video games, various things that have been produced in Japan over the years that have not been readily available here. Now, there have been a couple of things that have been in the United States. Oh yeah, Zarda's like how do all the components come out of this and fit into things? It's unclear. The magic of animation. So essentially, there are 3 other things that have been in the United States other than what we got specifically in Robotech. Okay. So Macross Do You Remember Love it's an OVA, so it's a movie that essentially retells the story of the original Macross series in 90 minutes with all new animation, some different aspects to the story. Some things are told in slightly different ways. They mix up the timeline a little bit. The animation is gorgeous. If you've never seen it, it's on YouTube. You can find it. It's often just shortened to Macross DYRL, Do You Remember Love. It was released here in the United States on VHS as Clash of the Bionoids for some reason. It's cool. It has some like really weird animation stuff. If you've ever seen Macross or Robotech, you might be familiar with the Itano Circus. It was created by a guy in Japan named Itano, and he designed the look when a jet or a spaceship or whatever the character is shoots a million little missiles and they're all flying around and corkscrewing through the air and then lots of explosions. That's a specific thing that this guy created, and so in Do You Remember Love, one of those happens. And if you have the capability, and we didn't for a long time with the VHS, but if you have the ability to pause, you can see that one of the missiles is actually it's like a giant Budweiser can missile for some reason. Why not? Okay, so there was that one. Then there were two other OVAs that were released here. Macross Plus, which lots and lots of people love. It's a really interesting story of a development project trying to make the next cool transforming jet fighter, essentially. And so two different companies make a prototype. They go through all these tests to see which one is going to be the best one. Then there's another story with a singer, because there's always a singer in Macross. And then there's lots of fights and cool stuff. And just like really beautiful animation. Macross Plus is fantastic. Highly recommend it. Music is great. All this sort of stuff. Then there's Macross 2, which is a totally separate thing. Macross 2 is a... What's up? Macross 2 is I guess you would call it like a mini-series. I forget how many episodes it is. 6 episodes? Something like that. Macross 2 is divisive. Let's put it that way. It sort of tells a story that could exist in the original Macross universe, just a little bit in the future. It's weird. I really like it. A lot of people really don't. But there are some super, super cool mech and spaceship designs in that series that I just absolutely love. And then unfortunately there are very few products for over the years. One of them, the standard Valkyrie in that series is the VF2SS. And it looks like this. So this is an actual official toy from Japan. It was in a blind boxed collection of little mini things. And this is what the VF2SS looks like. It's really cool. It's kind of clunky. It's wide. Typically in the series, you'll see it loaded down with a bunch of extra parts on it with bigger booster engines to make it faster anyway, and a bunch of extra weapons. But I think this is a beautiful design. So there's a person out there who is an expert 3D modeler. Well, a 3D modeler. I don't know how expert anybody is specifically. But this person does these really interesting kind of commission projects where they will say, okay, I'm going to work on a 3D model of this design. If anybody's interested, you can support me And then at the end of and I'm going to make this thing just for myself. And if you support me, then when I'm done with the project, then I'm just going to, for free, I'm going to give you the STL for it. So you're not actually buying the thing, right? You're just supporting an artist who's making things for himself, and then he happens to give you a free STL at the end. So this person was going to tackle the VF2SS, so this one. Now, was it successful? Well, we'll be the judge of that. Now, these are very raw prints. They need a lot of cleanup that I haven't done yet. In fact, they're still a little... I should put these out in the sun. They're a little tacky still. So this is what he ended up with, modeling his own version. Now, as a toy, even this one is not exact to what the design looked like in the animation. So in some ways, this 3D version is more accurate. In some ways, less. But it looks pretty cool. These parts are very thin. I don't know if you can see, but that wing is partially translucent. You can see through it. Well, you can't if there's light behind it. Originally, this was supposed to be smaller. It was supposed to be more in scale with, I guess, like closer to this. But the fins and the little tiny wings were too small. They weren't fully printing at that scale, so he had to bump it up a little bit. So the jet mode looks great, as I expected it to be. I don't remember the jet from SWAT Cats. I'm going to have to look that up. And then we have Battloid mode, which looks pretty good. The highly glossy resin doesn't do it a lot of favors. And again, it's still a little tacky. So I should probably try to cure a little bit more. And then, of course, if it was Robotech, it would be Guardian mode. It's Japanese, so it would be a Gerwalk mode. But yeah, and again, a little bit more complicated design with where everything goes. Got the fins way in the back. There is the head tucked underneath. But yeah, it's always cool to get something new that hasn't really been around very much. Now, there have been a couple of VF2SS collectibles made over the years. There's a model kit, again, a very advanced model kit, and a couple of more recent toys out of Japan that are hideously expensive. So I'm happy to have these. I really wish he would make the metal siren. That was like the most advanced thing from Macross 2. Yeah, it's CPAT Ran. I'm gonna have to look that up. Yeah, like I said, I totally don't remember the vehicle design from SWAT Cats. So yeah, so those are my new 3D printed collection of things. Oh, I also have some Hero Forge coming in. I had printed through them, not the colored ones. So now in Hero Forge, if any of you have not yet gone on and used Hero Forge, I don't know what is stopping you. Go! It's the most fun thing on the internet to play with. Unless you're doing some alone time. But even just like to play around and make characters and look at things, and now you can add color and all this stuff. And so you can actually have models now printed in color. Wild technology. I had 2 models printed, not in color. I'm going to paint them myself, but characters that my children made with my help in the program. So Benjamin made it's essentially like I guess it's like a Dragonborn character, and then Max made a dwarf with wings and a tail. Super silly, but I had those printed. Well, that should be coming in soon, I think. Hopefully. So yeah, so those are those prints. I did want to mention, and thank you so much for Arsenal Roy for pointing this out this morning. Oh yeah, yeah. So if anybody did not watch, for those of you who did not watch Hyper last night, we did Warhammer. It was wild for a bunch of different reasons, but yeah, I there were worms that the random chaos, not like the gods, but the chaos element were worms that would come up and eat things and shake things, and I didn't even think of it immediately, but several people who were buying those incentives started putting in Dune quotes, and so I immediately jumped up and grabbed my Dune sandworm toy from the movie and got to play around with that on the camera. Oh my god, it was so much fun. Yeah, oh by far that was the quickest game. Oh man, I haven't heard. I hope they did okay last night with all their work. It's wild. It is wild. But yeah, Arsenal Roy, let me point it out that we have actual casting information for Guy Gardner in the upcoming Green Lantern HBO Max series, which is wild. Yeah, and then actually that article on Deadline, it gives more information about the what the show's actually going to be about, and it's kind of wild. So it sounds like it's going to be, I don't know if it's an anthology or if how it's going to connect, but it says that we're going to get, part of the show is going to be the 1940s with Alan Scott. Part of the show is going to be in the 80s with Guy Gardner, and then some, it referred to a half alien character. And then it said we're going to see more, yeah, or anthology, or somehow, yeah, somehow the parts are going to fit together. And then it says we're going to see more characters from the comics as well as new characters they're going to make for the show. And yeah, look, I'm open, I'm interested. It's by some of the people on the team are part of the WB or the CW shows, but this doesn't sound like it's going to be quite exactly that. Especially because it's on HBO, they're going to dump a bunch of money into it, and I'm sure it'll be more adult because everything has to be these days. But yeah, Finn Wittrock, who most people know from American Horror Story seasons and some of the other projects that Ryan Murphy has done, he's going to be playing Guy Gardner, one of the main characters, and yeah, I'm totally down. Guy Gardner, I've talked about Guy Gardner before. Very interesting character who's gone through some very different incarnations over the years, from a total meathead to a jokey character, and then much more fleshed out over the last couple decades with Jeff Johns writing, and then being a part of the Red Lantern Corps and all sorts of other cool stuff. So that's cool. I'm into it. I don't know who knows if Hal Jordan's going to be on the show at all, or if they'll mention him, or what. Everybody's still a little gun shy about having Hal Jordan in live action after the Green Lantern movie. What are you going to do? He'll be back one day. One day. Yeah, he's a good actor. I think he was a model first before an actor, but that's fairly typical these days. Cool. What else? Got some stuff up on eBay. That's been exciting. Or rather, I'm selling things on eBay, so we'll see how that goes. I'm going to be placing an order for some interesting items coming up here. We'll see how much I talk about that. Maybe not technically licensed stuff again. Somehow these things just they just show up sometimes. But yeah, tomorrow. Yeah, he's been in a couple movies as well, I think. Yeah, you might recognize him from some of the smaller stuff that he's done, or other stuff that he's done rather. Unlicensed Necronomicon. I do have a copy of the Necronomicon. Tomorrow, Saturday, we will be back with the Warhammer War Room stream. Lots of stuff to talk about. Not just the new store opening in California here in LA, but just a bunch of stuff. I'll show off the progress I've made on my knight, which is going very well. And I cannot with 100% certainty say who the guest is tomorrow, just because I don't have that final confirmation. I wish I could. You're all going to be very happy to see this person, but not fully announcing that just yet. And then, of course, the Homebuddies group stream tomorrow night, which I believe is Jessica's, and I don't know what we're doing. I don't know if we're doing more improv or something else, but whatever it is, it's going to be fun, it's going to be funny, and you should tune in for that. I mentioned earlier Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Oh man, I wish. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, big Warhammer preview event coming. They did a preview for the preview, as they often do. They've been steadily, I don't know if anybody else has been paying attention, but they've steadily been making casting announcements for the Black Adam movie, and they've all been great. And the characters that are going to be in there, it's like a mini JSA, Justice Society of America movie, because we've got Hawkman, played by, I always forget his name, but he was the hacker on Leverage, and he was in one of the Star Trek Discovery shorts. I always forget his name, can't remember it, but he's great. And we've got freaking Dr. Fate is in the movie. Yeah, it's good. Aldous Hodge, thank you. That's, yeah, for some reason it gets stuck in his, that name does not get stuck in my head. Yeah. Oh yeah, and that was so Dr. Fate in this movie is going to be played by Pierce Brosnan, which is incredible on many levels. But as somebody noted, depending on what might happen in the future with all these DC properties, and if Warner Brothers can ever, make a cohesive universe like the Marvel universe and actually mix in the TV shows and the movies, we could potentially get two former Bonds together, because we also have Timothy Dalton on TV's Doom Patrol, which he's so good in, and that would be fantastic. Yeah, Dr. Fate is super cool. Again, that's a character that over the years there have been many different Dr. Fates. It's sort of like a Sorcerer Supreme thing where it gets passed on. The helm of Naboo is the helmet, and that gets passed on to different people. Sometimes it's multiple people who fuse into Dr. Fate at once, and it's very complicated. Zardoz, I believe he's playing Fate. I can't remember what they said. Is it Nelson? I don't remember exactly what they said, but yeah, I don't think he's playing Naboo, which would also be cool. So yeah, in DC Comics there are the Lords of Order and Chaos, which obviously these entities that control things, and they have representatives that are out there, and it's sort of like in D&D where order and chaos are not necessarily good and evil. It can mix in different ways. Those are also the entities that empower Hawk and Dove. Yeah, it's comic book lore and continuity, so it's complicated. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think he's Kent. But good stuff. Oh, and I had mentioned this earlier this week, but I'm going to be removing Tuesday morning from my streaming schedule. So no more Toy Tuesday. So Fridays will probably be more Figure Fridays will probably be more toy focused than models going forward, but it'll be a variety. For the time being, I think Monday, Wednesday, Friday for my streams will be best. But again, we'll still keep all the other things. Tuesday afternoon with Jessica, Wednesday afternoon Miss Video Games, and then the Saturday streams. So still a lot of streams, a lot of content, but one fewer standard show. Freeform Friday. That works. I like that. All right. Speaking of Fridays, let's see. Who are we going to raid today? Ooh, that could be fun. Let me switch over here. Yeah. So hopefully you all come back tomorrow for all the great streams on Saturday. Otherwise, have an awesome weekend. Oh, come on. Let me type in the command here. Be safe. Get your vaccine if you can. We are going to raid. We're going to raid Perlman. I've never raided him. And yes, his channel is intended for mature audiences. So watch out for that. Perlman is a wacky guy. I've had a lot of fun doing some streams with him over the last little while. Yeah, so this was super cool. I'm very excited about all these new minis. There's a lot of work I got to do to clean these things up. Whoa, where's the camera? There it is. So yeah, see how like the bottom is so uneven, but you got to be really careful when you add supports to your 3D printed miniatures when you make them, and where those supports go and how you clean them off and that whole thing. We'll talk more about that in the future when I start printing things. All right, everybody, go and say hi to Perlman and have an awesome weekend. And I'll see you around. All right, raid goes now. All right, raid is happening slowly.